Guys, it's me, Halloween Dan, and today's video is a little bit different in that we're in that weird period now. There's this weird, it happens every year where there's not a huge amount to talk about. It's sort of, we always start the year with a riot of huge amounts of announcements and leaks and all kinds of cool things, and then all of a sudden it goes very quiet, and we're all sort of waiting for more stuff to be revealed.
Ooh, hurry up!
And the truth is, at least for a while, we're not going to see a great deal more. There's a possibility we might see something from Home Depot at some point, but the chances are now, until we get to Spirit revealing everything and the full lineup revealed from Home Depot, and for us here in the UK, we start to see snippets of things coming out of Costco and the likes, it's gonna be pretty quiet for a while. So I was trying to think of what I could do for a video, and there is one thing I've been wanting to talk about, and that's my own haunt and what I might potentially like to do this year. So join me. So, if you watched a podcast that I was part of with Scare Dad a couple of weeks ago, the Middle-Aged Men Talk About Halloween podcast, which we're hoping to do another episode of very soon, you'll have seen in that podcast that I talked very briefly about my haunt and also what I was hoping to do later this year for my haunt 2024 season. But I'm not gonna lie, guys, I need your help. I would love to hear from you guys in this one because I need some advice. I need a bit of direction. It's getting to that point. It might only be April, but I feel like I need to focus my attention on one particular element more than anything else, because at the minute my brain's running in a million different directions. Ever since last Halloween, as Halloween ended, my brain just exploded with a million different ideas. And I've really got to rein them in and make sure whatever it is I choose to do, I do well. So just a quick brief rundown of my garden and haunt for those of you who don't really know. Being that I'm from the UK, there isn't a huge amount of availability when it comes to props and stuff unless you're willing to pay a fortune. So you do have to use your imagination a bit, and you do have to be a little bit more inventive. The other hiccup I have is that my front garden where I do my display is very narrow. At its widest, it's about 8 foot wide. It is not a very large plot of land of which to do a display on. Yet somehow I managed to do it. I'm quite pleased with how I managed to pack so much into quite a limited space and how I've continually reinvented it all the time. I'm thinking of going up this year, maybe taking on some higher elements of my house. I don't know. There's a lot of thoughts going into this year. I certainly want to build some new pillars this year because my pillars bit the big one last year. Sad to say. Also, I want to maybe adapt the witch house, make it a little bit better. But my main focus, the big thing, the real big apple of all apples, whatever that means, is something I've got planned for pretty much the largest part of my garden, and it means retiring something else. For the last couple of years, on the sort of widest part of my lawn, which is on the right hand side of my house, I've done a very kind of pirate display. I built a pirate ship. It was supposed to be the unifying piece of that section of my haunt that brought lots of different elements together. It was this ruined pirate ship that had kind of washed up on the shores of my house, and I was supposed to theme a lot of the stuff there piratey, but never really did. And as pressed as I was with my building ability to build this little pirate ship, and everybody who saw it loved it, it still didn't really fulfill its destiny. It was just a big hunk of wood sat on my front garden, looking vaguely like a ruined pirate ship and not really bringing anything else to the table. And by the end of Halloween last year, I looked at it and I was like, what are you doing? What are you bringing?
Why must you fail me so often?
You're not bringing it. And I realised I was not going to build that thing for a third year. There's no way I was going to spend 2024 trying to reassemble it for a third time, which meant that it needed to be replaced. And it was at that point that my brain absolutely jumped into hyperspeed. And I just saw flashes of possibility everywhere. But I had to control myself, and I thought, well, hang on, just rein it in a second. Because what is your haunt? What is your haunt, Dan? Think about what it actually is. Let's try and match it up with at least a little bit with the other things you've got. And quite simply, what I realised was that my haunt is a classic haunt. All the elements that are in my haunt are classic Halloween elements. There's nothing overly out there in my haunt. It's ghosts, it's witches, it's skeletons, it's reapers, it's monsters, it's that kind of stuff. But there is an element of the classic Halloween genre that I've never really pursued, and that I thought this could be my opportunity. And that was the classic universal Halloween monsters. And of the classic monsters, two stood out more than any other. And that was Frankenstein's monster and Dracula. And the one thing that I thought unified these two characters, the thing that I thought this would work well as a backdrop piece, was a castle. So immediately my brain started fever pitching the idea of having a very basic mock-up of a castle. What I'm going to show you now is a very rudimentary drawing I've made of the sort of thing I've got planned. This is the castle I'm thinking of building. It is basically the corner of a room, 6 foot wide and 8 foot tall. Well, 6 foot by 6 foot, 8 foot by 8 foot. 2 walls basically brought together to make a little castle scene. That's it. That's as far as I can go. You know, I'm no Wicked Makers or Hollywood Haunter here, guys. I am just a guy from the UK with limited resources. So this is what I'm thinking of doing. It's going to be a wood panel at the back with some foam. I'm hoping to get some 2-inch foam, cladding it, and then I can carve a stone effect into it. You'll notice on the left-hand wall, there is a doorway. On the right-hand wall, there is a window. And then just to kind of give it a castle-y effect, I'm adding the crenellations on the top to give it look like a castle, even though it's technically supposed to be inside the castle, but you know. And also a tower that's supposed to have an idea that it's like part of a castle that lies beyond just that little room. That's the idea of the tower, possibly with a little bell in it. Who knows? The castle itself will not change regardless of what I choose to do with it. This is what it's going to look like. This is what I'm aiming towards. It's going to have a very basic stone wall effect, and that's about it. Anything else I add is kind of dependent upon the direction I go in. And there's kind of 4 directions that it could potentially go in. The reason I like the castle idea is, even if I didn't choose to do Frankenstein's monster or Dracula, castles are creepy. They go very well with cemetery theme. They go very well with creepy, ghost, haunted theme. They go well also with the story I try to tell around Medway Manor being my house. The story being that at one point the house is destroyed and the ruins are kind of left scattered about before part of it's rebuilt. So it kind of ties in well with the story too. So the most basic version of this castle is just that. A haunted castle. It's a backdrop of a castle. I might make it look a bit more ruined than it actually looks in this picture. And then I'd have it with ghosts. Now I could do that with, there's the possibility of adding a moving ghost in the doorway. There's the possibility of having a ghost flying around the room. There's the possibility of adding a projection in the doorway or possibly in the window. There's a million different things I could do to spookify up the scene. But that is a very basic thing, and if I've spent all this time building this castle, to just sort of fill it with ghosts and stuff could be a little bit boring. So my aim really is to try and do something to do with the 2 monster characters I've spoken about. The problem is that I can't make my mind up which one I'd rather do. And I did ask this question all the way back in November, I think, vaguely. I still can't make my mind up. And I think what I can't make my mind up on is that I'm kind of waiting to see what comes out this year. If, by some miracle, here in the UK, we get an easily accessible animatronic of either of these 2 characters, I think my decision will be made. If we get a great Frankenstein's monster prop here in the UK, then I'll probably do a Frankenstein's monster theme. If we get a great Dracula or vampire prop here in the UK, I'll probably do a vampire scene. It really is that basic. It will base upon if I can get my hands on a prop that matches up with the story I'm trying to tell. If a Frankenstein's monster appeared on the scene that was easily accessible to me, the theme then would be mad scientist, right? So you've got your Frankenstein's monster, and then everything else around the Frankenstein's monster would be themed that way. So perhaps I would adapt one of my props I've already got to make a kind of an Igor prop. I would maybe have a table with scientific equipment. I've got lots of different lights. We've got one of those plasma balls. We've got lava lamps. I've got jars that I could put like body parts in and have some just pickled and have some bubbling and all kinds of things like that. I could probably hook up a very basic looking sort of scientific water running through pipes kind of looking thing. There are a million things you can do with the mad scientist kind of haunt look. And this is something I'm quite excited about. I quite like the idea of doing this. So I think my heart is leaning more to the Frankenstein's monster theme than it is to the Dracula one. And if I did this theme, everything lighting wise would be to surround that prop. So green is a great go-to color, I think, for Frankenstein's monster haunt. If you notice on the floor, what I would do with the floor, what I'm thinking of doing with the floor is elevating the whole scene up by a few inches and having it on pallets. And the reason I'd put it on pallets, not only because they're great, they're really strong and they'd help to weigh down the whole set, but because you can thread lights through pallets, and if you can do that, I could light it up green, so you could have this light up green lighting through the pallets, which I think would give a really good lighting effect in general. The window is the only thing that I'm not sure what I would do if I had a Frankenstein's monster. I have this idea of creating a very basic vampire silhouette in the window and then having lightning flashes flashing against the window, so the silhouette's only visible when there's a flash of lightning. I suppose I could do that regardless, whether it's a Frankenstein scene or not. It doesn't matter that there's a vampire lingering about outside. But I think that makes more sense within a Dracula-themed haunted experience. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I can throw that one in there as a sneaky little extra. So I like that. I like the Frankenstein's monster idea. I like the lighting possibilities with that. I like all the added little scientific equipment I could add in as details. I think that would be pretty cool, and you wouldn't need much more than that. If a Dracula prop came along, this one poses a few more difficult things, I think, in a weird kind of way. So I'd have the Dracula prop, which again, I could stand maybe somewhere near the doorway. And then I could do that with the window, have this silhouette of the vampire outside. And I think that would be pretty cool. And then the lighting would be more red, because it's the obvious colour. But beyond that, I'm kind of stuck as to how else I'd theme it. Would I just buy anything else that looked kind of vampiric? Would I have a coffin? Would I have to build the coffin? I don't know. Would a coffin just be another big empty thing? Or would I have to have the coffin lid opening and a vampire inside the coffin as well? Is that not just more work? The only thing I could think of as well, apart from a coffin, was like a fountain of blood. I don't know, I was trying to think of things. Or a bat flying above the whole scene. I was trying to think of things that made sense to Dracula in a castle. And they were the only things that came to mind. So let me know what else you think of. I think the scene would still look pretty good. You could add a load of candles, maybe some of them flame effect lamps. I think it would look awesome. But I just don't want it to be that two-dimensional. I kind of want this to be, I want there to be things moving. I want there to be things sort of appearing that you don't see 1 minute and do see the next. So I do like the idea of a vampire in a coffin, but I don't know whether I want to have that and an animatronic vampire as well. I can't make my mind up. Of course, the possibility that neither a Frankenstein's monster prop or a Dracula prop will become available to me this year. In which case, I'm left with a conundrum. I'd have this castle, which would look great, but nothing particularly to fill it with. So at that point, that's where I might have to get my homemade skills out a little bit and think a little bit longer. So with the vampire, if I went down the vampire route, that's where I would be more happy to build a coffin and try and figure out a way of the lid opening and a basic vampire being inside. That would then make sense to the scene, and I wouldn't have had to obviously invest in an animatronic. The Frankenstein one is the one that I struggle with more because I'm not the most technical of guys, and I know there's got to be people who've got to say, I know how to do that. You just have to buy these servos and this microchip and this thing and this thing. And I'm like, no, I don't know it. You're talking science at me. Stop talking science at me. Obvious thing in that, if I was trying to make a Frankenstein's monster, I think is a Frankenstein layout on a bed and having him rise up off the bed. But I don't know how to do that. I've looked into ways of trying to do it, and apart from with pneumatics, I don't think there's an actual other way of doing it. Tell me if I'm wrong. That makes the most sense to me, but I think for me, the one that I would most easily be able to achieve is literally the most basic thing. It would be a Frankenstein sat in a chair with a basic motor put at the back that makes his shoulders move forward like that. So it would look as though he'd maybe just been woken and he was trying to get up out of the chair. Maybe I could add some sound effects like electricity sound effects or something like that. Have the lightning flashing in the window. I don't know. There are things I can do, and there are things I think I can do relatively easily, but I just don't know. As for all the extra elements, I think that depending upon my accessibility to an animatronic, I think that's going to be the defining thing, in entirely honest. And all the other extras, whether that be a bat flying above it or a fountain of blood or scientific equipment, I think I could pretty much mash all those things together. That's kind of the fourth route in a way. So you've got just a spooky castle filled with ghosts, possibly a spooky castle filled with Dracula stuff, possibly a spooky castle filled with Frankenstein's monster stuff, or just a spooky castle filled with all of that stuff. That's how my brain is thinking at the minute. And I think it might be overload if I don't choose a theme. If I don't focus on a vampire or focus on Dracula or focus on ghosts, it might be too much. But I think a little bit of all these extra things might work well. For instance, there's no reason why if I choose Dracula, you still can't have a ghost maybe in the doorway moving around because it's still a haunted castle. Like with the Frankenstein scene, there's no reason why you couldn't still have the silhouette of Dracula up against the window, and maybe a ghost as well, you know, even a bat. There's no reason why bats live in castles regardless. So there are still these things you could do that I think would make sense regardless. But I don't think, for instance, it would make sense to have Dracula and a load of scientific equipment. So there are some elements that I could include and some elements that I think I'd have to leave to one side. Either way, I like all the possibilities. And my brain is kind of just keeps on inventing things constantly and thinking that would be cool. Oh, I could add that. Oh, I could take this out and put this in instead. There are a million things, and there are also some problems I haven't yet solved. But this is the route I'm thinking of going down. And what I'd love to hear from you guys is if you think it's good, but also what you would add. What would your theme be? And how would you do these things that I've talked about? Because your advice really does mean a lot to me. So I'd love to hear from you on that. As for the rest of my horn, it's going to be pretty much what I usually do with little adaptations here and there. Like I say, I might make the witch's house a bit better. I've got to rebuild my columns and I might tweak a few things here and there. I was playing with the idea of adding backdrops, like a cemetery backdrop for the cemetery and a witchy woodland for the witches. But then, you know what? I actually thought against it because my house is Medway Manor. The house is the manor house, which the story links into and why it's kind of haunted and possessed by all these strange creatures and monsters and stuff. So I want to leave the house as a backdrop because I quite like it. The only thing I might add, because I really like this idea of the silhouette up against the house, is I might get some big dead branches from the woods and like stick them into my borders around my house so that when the lights light up the side of the house, you get these creepy woodland sort of twisted branches effect, shadows up against the side of the house. That might be pretty cool. There's lots of other ideas I've got that I will talk about in other videos, and there are some builds that I will show later in the season that I hope turn out the way I would like them to turn out. But for now, guys, that was the main thing I wanted to talk about. What do you think? Please comment in the comment section. Let me know what your thoughts, and if you've got any great ideas yourself that I could use, let me know. I'm very, very interested. But for now, guys, I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Keep it spooky. Bye.